They actually said my daughter didn't deserve to live, that she was a waste of resources. I remember standing in that sterile hospital hallway, my knees nearly buckling as those words echoed in my ears. My daughter, my beautiful Lily, was lying in a bed 2 doors down, clutching her stuffed elephant, fighting for each breath with a strength most adults could never muster, and someone with zero connection to her, had convinced the hospital administration to cancel her life-saving surgery. Who could be so cruel? Who has that kind of hate in their heart? But before I take you through the firestorm that followed, the media frenzy, the lawsuits, the HOA meetings that turned into war zones, let me take you back to where it all began. Back to the little neighborhood we thought was a fresh start. I'm a single father, a veteran, and for the past 6 years, Lily has been the center of my universe. She was born with a rare congenital heart defect. Doctors said she wouldn't make it past age 2, but she proved everyone wrong. She's the kind of kid who hums little tunes while painting rocks in the backyard, who knows every animal in the rainforest, and believes kindness is a kind of superpower. When we moved into Willow Creek, it felt like we finally had a shot at peace. A tight-knit suburban community with trimmed hedges, chirping birds, and a neighborhood newsletter that bragged about bake sales and block parties. Lily loved the park just down the street, even if she had to sit and watch from her wheelchair more often than play. And I figured this was the kind of place where neighbors looked out for each other, but it didn't take long before the cracks began to show. The first sign was small, a note taped to my front door. Please move your daughter's medical equipment out of sight. It ruins the curb appeal. No name, no signature, just a typed-out message with a smiling HOA logo at the bottom. I try to brush it off. People are uncomfortable with what they don't understand, right? But then came the stares, cold, lingering ones from a woman 3 houses down. Blonde, tightly wound, always dressed like she was headed to a courtroom or a funeral. Karen. That was her real name, not just the internet meme, and she seemed to have taken a personal offense to Lily's existence. First, it was the ramp we installed for Lily's wheelchair. Unsightly, she said. Then it was our accessible van, which she claimed took up too much space in our own driveway. I reported her to the HOA board, but they did nothing. Turns out, Karen was the vice president. At first, I tried to keep my head down. I focused on Lily's health, her happiness, on staying grateful for every day we got with her. But Karen, she had other plans. She started showing up at the hospital during Lily's appointments, uninvited. Once, she even asked a nurse how much her treatments were costing taxpayers. I should have known something darker was coming. But nothing could have prepared me for the day the hospital called and said Lily's surgery had been canceled because someone claiming to speak for us told them Lily wouldn't make it and that the resources should be allocated to someone with a better prognosis. My mouth went dry. My fingers went numb. I couldn't breathe. Someone had actually taken it upon themselves to decide whether my daughter lived or died. And it was her, Karen. She did it. And that's when the fight really began. Because no one, not a neighbor, not an HOA board, not even a hospital, gets to play God with my child's life. What happened next would shake our community to its core and expose how deep this sickness ran. But before I tell you about the courtroom, the media storm, and the final moments that brought the truth crashing down, you need to know how we got there. Because what started as a neighborly disagreement turned into something far more sinister. And I'm here to make sure it's never forgotten. Lily came into this world already fighting. The doctors called it a severe congenital heart defect, the kind where words like unlikely survival and multiple surgeries get thrown around before your baby even takes her first breath. My wife didn't make it through childbirth. So from day one, it was just me and Lily, 2 hearts broken in different ways, but somehow beating for each other. Her tiny body was fragile, tubes everywhere, alarms constantly beeping in NICU. But her eyes were wide, curious, full of a kind of quiet strength I still don't understand. The nurses used to say she had a warrior soul. They were right. She survived not 1, not 2, but 5 surgeries before her 5th birthday. Every birthday was a miracle. Every breath, a gift. And in all those years, Despite the pain, the medications, the endless hospital stays, she never stopped smiling. She'd wheel around the hospital halls in her little pink wheelchair, handing out handmade cards to patients and humming songs she made up on the spot. She'd name every four-pole like it was a friend and convince doctors to play hide and seek. To her, life wasn't about limitations, it was about joy. I remember once she told me, "Daddy, I think my heart's like a puzzle, but God's still putting it together." That kind of hope, it does something to you. It humbles you. It breaks you in all the right ways. When we moved into Willow Creek, it was supposed to be a new chapter. A quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and the kind of cul-de-sac where kids played tag until sunset. I chose it because it had the best pediatric care nearby, and it looked safe, like the kind of place that would finally give Lily a slice of normal. And for a while it did. She loved it there. Every morning, she'd roll out onto our porch with her sketchbook, drawing birds and butterflies, sometimes just waving at neighbors as they walked their dogs. There was a park 3 blocks down with a swing designed for kids in wheelchairs, and Lily claimed it as her throne. The older ladies in the neighborhood would stop by with cookies or crafts, and Lily would chat them up like she was the mayor. We even hosted a small neighborhood barbecue once. I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd found home. But there was one house we never got a warm welcome from. 3 doors, down, big white pillars, black shutters, everything so pristine it looked like a model home. That's where she lived, Karen. The first time we locked eyes, she was watering her roses. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared at us like we were an oil stain on her driveway. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just having a bad day. But the days turned into weeks, and the stares turned into whispers. Then the notes started coming. The first one was tucked under our welcome mat. "Your vehicle doesn't meet HOA aesthetic standards." It was our modified van, adapted so Lily could safely get in and out. Then came the second, "The medical ramp on your porch violates visual harmony." The ramp Lily needed to enter her home. At first, I responded politely, offering to paint the ramp to discuss options, but the HOA didn't reply. I found out later that Karen was on the board. Actually, she was the board, vice president on paper, but she ran it like a queen with a gavel. She started nitpicking everything, our grass length, our porch lights, even Lily's chalk drawings on the sidewalk. One day, Lily had drawn a big heart and wrote "Be kind" inside it. Karen stood in front of it with a hose and washed it away while Lily watched from the window. When Lily asked me why, I didn't know what to say. How do you explain cruelty to a child who only knows kindness? Then things got unsettling. Karen began showing up where she didn't belong at the park when we were there, lingering a little too long near our property, snapping pictures with her phone. Once, we came home from the hospital and found our trash bins turned over and scattered, just ours. Another time, Lily's wheelchair was moved from the porch and left on the grass like it had been tossed there. It was all subtle, deniable, just enough to make me question whether I was overreacting. But Lily wasn't oblivious. She'd say things like, "Why doesn't the flower lady like me?" And that broke me more than any surgery ever could. I tried reporting it, collecting proof, filing complaints, but everything disappeared into the HOA's void. Karen's behavior went unchecked, and the rest of the board stayed silent. And then one night, Lily had a scare. Her heart rate dropped dangerously low. We rushed her to the ER, and the doctors said she needed a corrective surgery within weeks. It was high risk, but necessary. We were scared, but hopeful. Lily, of course, just said, "Will they fix my puzzle heart this time?" And I promised her we'd do everything we could. The surgery was scheduled. Preparations were made. We thought the hardest part was ahead of us, the operating table. But the real danger wasn't in the hospital. It was just 3 doors down, hiding behind clipped hedges and a perfect lawn. And we had no idea what she was planning next. It all started unraveling slowly, like a thread pulled quietly from the edge of a sweater. At first, Karen's cruelty was hidden beneath the thin veil of HOA policy. Veiled threats dressed up as official notices, complaints signed with concern, and smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. After Lily's surgery was scheduled, it was as though something inside Karen snapped. She must have known. Maybe someone at the hospital told her, someone she manipulated, or maybe she just kept tabs on us more than we realized. The week we got the surgery date confirmed, we came home to a brand new violation notice from the HOA, excessive noise disturbance during non-approved hours. It was stamped in red. The irony? Lily had barely been home. She'd spent most of that week in bed, her oxygen machine softly whirring as she napped through the afternoons. There were no parties, no gatherings, just the sound of cartoons on low volume and the occasional laughter of a child who, despite everything, still found joy in SpongeBob reruns. But it didn't stop there. Next came a letter about litter on our property. It wasn't litter. It was sidewalk chalk, Lily's messages of hope again, hearts and stars and words. Like, keep going and you matter. Karen took pictures of it, emailed them to the HOA board with the subject line, unacceptable graffiti on community paths. I found those emails later when I finally got access. But at the time, I just found the chalk washed away, again, always the same passive-aggressive erasure of my daughter's existence. One night, I watched from the upstairs window as Karen stood under the street lamp with a garden hose, spraying the sidewalk clean. She looked up and saw me watching, and she smiled. Not the kind of smile neighbors give each other. The kind that dares you to do something. That smile haunted me. It would be easy to write Karen off as just another petty neighborhood tyrant. The kind who has nothing better to do than measure lawn heights and count dandelions. But this was something else. This wasn't about order. This was about hate. Cold, calculated hate for a child who had done nothing wrong. And the silence from the rest of the HOA only confirmed it. I attended a meeting that month, my first in a long time. I walked in expecting a chance to speak, to defend my family, to lay the truth bare. But from the moment I sat down, I felt it. The stares, the turned shoulders, the whispered exchanges. Karen sat at the front like a judge, tapping her pen against a clipboard, her eyes never leaving me. I waited for public comment. I raised my hand, and I spoke, calmly at first, explaining the repeated harassment, the vandalism, the false accusations. But when I mentioned Lily, my voice broke. I told them she had a major surgery coming up, that we didn't need this stress, that this neighborhood was supposed to be a safe place, and that we needed compassion, not cruelty. The room stayed quiet. Not a single person responded. Not one neighbor stood up. One board member cleared his throat and muttered something about standards and procedures. Karen simply leaned forward and said, "This community has rules. If you can't follow them, maybe this isn't the right place for you." I left that meeting with shaking hands and a twisted gut. I realized we were alone, surrounded by people, yet entirely isolated. And the worst part was, Lily knew something was wrong. She was too smart not to. She started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Why do people not want us here, Daddy? Is it because of my chair? Do I make things too hard for you? I tried to shield her, to keep her world bright and soft, but she was growing up, and she could feel the hostility even if she didn't fully understand it. Once, after a particularly rough night, she asked if maybe she should skip the surgery. Maybe it's too expensive, she said. Maybe someone else needs it more. My heart shattered. I held her face in my hands and told her, "You deserve everything, Lily, everything good in this world." But the seed had already been planted. Karen had spoken loud enough and often enough that the idea had rooted itself in my daughter's heart, that she was a burden, a waste, and that was unforgivable. Then came the turning point. We got an anonymous call one morning from a nurse at the hospital. A quiet, breathless whisper on the other end. "I thought you should know. Someone called the hospital claiming to be your wife. Said you were rescinding consent for the surgery. Said your daughter had no quality of life, and it wasn't worth the resources. We knew something felt off, so we flagged the file. But you need to talk to the director." I nearly dropped the phone. My wife had been dead for years, and someone had used her name, forged her identity, to try and cancel my daughter's only chance at survival. I drove to the hospital like a madman. my pulse in my throat, my jaw clenched, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I got there, the director showed me the file, the notes, the call logs, the signature, and there it was, clear as day, a name scribbled at the bottom of the fax form. Karen Elizabeth Monroe. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She thought she could do it, just like she had gotten away with everything else. A phone call here, a complaint there, manipulating systems, hiding behind titles and procedures. And this time, she almost succeeded. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside Lily's bed, watching her breathe, watching her chest rise and fall under the soft glow of her nightlight. The machine beeped steadily. Her fingers twitched occasionally in dreams. I thought about how many battles she had fought to get here, how many nights I had spent begging whatever higher power was listening to just give me one more day with her. And now someone thought they could take her from me with a signature, with a lie. That's when something inside me shifted. The quiet, grieving father died that night. In his place, a fighter woke up. I decided I would not let this go. I would not walk away quietly. I would make noise. I would expose the truth, even if the entire neighborhood turned against me, even if Karen threatened legal action, HOA fines, or more. I didn't care, because Lily wasn't just fighting for her life in the hospital. She was fighting for her place in the world. And I'd be damned if I let anyone, especially someone like Karen, tell my daughter she didn't deserve to exist. The next morning, I filed a police report. I started recording everything. I reached out to lawyers, and I called a local reporter I knew from my military days. I told her the whole story, and I made one promise. If they try to erase my daughter again, the entire world is going to hear about it. The morning of Lily's scheduled surgery felt like the quiet before storm. Not a real storm, not thunder or rain, but the kind you feel in your bones, the kind that makes the air heavy and still. I had packed her overnight bag the night before. Pajamas with her favorite cartoon bunnies, her stuffed elephant, the one she's had since birth, and a new book about brave girls with strong hearts. She was humming as we waited for the transport van, legs bouncing with a nervous kind of energy. "Do you think I'll feel different afterward?" she asked. I smiled and said, "Stronger. I think you'll feel stronger." She nodded like she already believed it. The hospital had prepped everything. We had been through countless consultations, scans, tests. The pediatric cardiac team had walked us through every possibility, every risk. And we were ready, scared, but ready. But just as I zipped up her bag and reached for the keys, the phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said to answer. "Mr. Daniels?" The woman's voice on the other end said. "Yes." I replied, confused. "This is Brenda from Children's Medical. I don't know how to say this, but we received a request this morning to cancel Lily's surgery. It's already been filed and processed. We just assumed you'd made the decision." My vision tunneled. My breath caught. What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, already grabbing my jacket. "Who gave you that request? That's not possible. That's not for me." There was a pause, and then she said the words that chilled me to the core. The request was signed by Karen Monroe. She claimed to be your wife, your daughter's legal guardian. She faxed in documents stating Lily was no longer eligible for treatment and that this procedure was a misuse of resources. I didn't wait for more. I hung up and raced to the hospital, Lily's bag in one hand, her wheelchair loaded into the back seat, in a haze. Lily sat in the passenger seat, quietly, watching me, sensing my panic, but not asking questions. At the hospital, everything felt wrong. The receptionist greeted us with a forced smile, eyes darting like she knew something had gone horribly off script. We were escorted not to pre-op, but to a small consultation room. A woman in a dark blazer, the hospital's legal coordinator, sat with a folder already open in front of her. "Mr. Daniels," she began, "we were under the impression your family rescinded consent due to the patient's declining condition." "That's a lie," I said immediately. "My daughter's condition hasn't declined. She's eligible. She's ready. I never rescinded anything." Then I saw the forms. A signed cancellation. typed reasoning that said Lily was non-responsive, unfit for surgery, no longer able to contribute meaningfully to society. I stood up, slamming my fist on the table. Who the hell wrote this? I roared. Who decides my daughter doesn't matter? That's when I saw the name printed clearly at the bottom of the authorization. Karen Elizabeth Monroe, in block letters, all caps, like she was proud of it. I stared at that signature like it was poison. The hospital tried to cover themselves, said they had a duty to respond to formal requests, that they had no reason to question what seemed like a legitimate withdrawal. But they hadn't verified anything. They hadn't called me. They hadn't asked for ID. They took a fax from a stranger, a woman with no relation to Lily, no custody, no medical proxy, and almost let my child die because of it. I demanded an emergency meeting with the hospital board. In that sterile white room, I laid out everything: the fake guardianship, the harassment, the falsified cancellation. I brought printouts of previous HOA complaints, photos of our home vandalized, recordings of Karen making hateful remarks about Lily in neighborhood meetings. The more I showed, the more red their faces turned. And then, like a final punch to the gut, the hospital's compliance officer muttered she used her influence. I believe her brother-in-law is on our executive donor board. Silence fell, and there it was, the missing piece. Karen Monroe, vice president of the Willow Creek HOA, wasn't just an angry neighbor. She was connected. Her brother-in-law, Matthew Klein, sat on the hospital's most powerful fundraising committee, the same board that helped decide how donor funds were allocated. That's how she got away with it. That's how her fax was taken seriously. That's how my daughter's life was nearly stolen with a signature and a lie. I could have collapsed then. Could have broken down right there on the floor, watching years of fighting unravel into a single betrayal. But Lily was still holding my hand. She looked at me with those big, unflinching eyes and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. We can try again tomorrow." She didn't know what happened, not fully, but somehow she still believed we could fix it. That's when I knew we had to fight harder. That this wasn't just about surgery anymore. It was about every child like Lily who had been told they were too expensive, too inconvenient, too broken to matter. I went straight to the police and filed charges: fraud, impersonation, medical interference. I contacted the media. I told them everything. Within days, a local investigative reporter picked up the story and ran it under the headline: HOA official accused of canceling disabled girl surgery. It went viral. People were furious. National outlets picked it up. Karen's smug face was plastered across every feed, every screen. She denied it at first, of course, said it was a misunderstanding, claimed the documents were doctored, but the paper trail told the truth. Her fax number, her handwriting, her arrogance. And then a nurse came forward, anonymously admitting she had overheard Karen on the phone, bragging that she did what the doctors didn't have the guts to do: stop wasting money on a vegetable. The hospital, under mounting pressure, reinstated Lily's surgery within 72 hours. A new doctor was assigned. The board issued a formal apology. But by then, the damage was done. Lily was anxious, frightened. Her trust in the world had been shaken. The surgery went ahead the following week, and by the grace of God, it was a success. She came out with a stitched-up chest and a fighting spirit that hadn't dimmed. But I could see something in her had changed. She didn't ask about chalk drawings anymore. She didn't talk about the swing at the park. She just held my hand and said, "I'm glad you didn't give up on me." I kissed her forehead and promised, never, not for a second. I once believed the world ran on decency, that if someone was cruel, the system would step in, correct it, hold them accountable. But after nearly losing my daughter to a lie wrapped in bureaucracy, I realized something terrifying. The system only works if someone forces it to. And so I became that force. The day after Lily's surgery, while she rested peacefully in her hospital bed, I began the process of digging up every trace of what Karen had done. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. I started with the hospital records. I requested call logs, fax metadata, timestamps, anything that could connect Karen to the forged documents. It took legal pressure, but they eventually turned them over. There it was, a call from Karen's personal phone number to the hospital's front desk, followed by a fax document from a number registered to Monroe Property Services, a small HOA-linked company Karen had quietly set up under her husband's name. And the document? Signed electronically by K. E. Monroe. It was cold, calculated, and damning. I took screenshots, printed everything, created a file so thick it could knock someone unconscious. Then I started recording voice memos, neighborhood interactions, even a video of Karen in her front yard yelling at me to go back to whatever charity case we crawled out from. And it wasn't just paper trails and hate-filled shouting. As I pushed deeper, a neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Dawson, quietly slipped a flash drive into my mailbox. No note, just a plastic drive wrapped in a napkin. I plugged it in and found a series of video clips from her security camera. In one of them, Karen stood by our front porch in the dead of night, holding Lily's wheelchair by its handle and muttering, "They're going to learn the hard way." Then she shoved the chair off the porch. It tumbled, scraping the side of the ramp, and landed sideways in the garden. That clip alone was enough to ignite a firestorm. I sent everything to my lawyer and to a local investigative journalist named Melanie Torres, someone I had served with years ago in a disaster relief mission. She now worked for Channel 8 News. When I showed her the footage, she went pale. "We need to go public," she said. "This isn't just harassment. This is targeted medical sabotage." Within 48 hours, her piece aired during the evening segment under the title, "HOA Leader Accused of Derailing Disabled Child Surgery." Karen's image filled the screen, posed, polished, and then side by side with footage of Lily in a hospital gown smiling and holding her elephant. The contrast struck a nerve across the country. The internet exploded. Twitter trended with hashtags like hashtag Justice for Lily and hashtag HOA Karen. Thousands of people commented, shared, and reposted, people outraged that a person with no medical authority could interfere in a child's life and death treatment. Karen, for her part, stayed quiet for almost a day. Then she appeared on a local HOA blog, trying to justify her actions. "I only wanted what was best for the community," she wrote. "Resources are finite. These decisions are hard, but someone has to make them." It was tone-deaf, heartless, and very, very public. That blog post went viral too, and not in the way she hoped. News networks began hounding her. Her workplace, a real estate firm, fired her within the week. Protesters showed up outside her home holding signs that read, "A child's life isn't your property, and who made you God?" But Karen wasn't done. No, she doubled down. She filed a defamation claim against me, claiming I had orchestrated a media smear campaign. I laughed when I got the papers. I'd been in enough battles to know when someone's just flailing. My lawyer filed a countersuit immediately, attempted medical fraud, emotional distress, defamation, and abuse of power under HOA jurisdiction. We subpoenaed HOA records, including emails from Karen to other board members, and that's when it got worse. Much worse. There were messages where she called Lily a waste of space, and others where she casually suggested they find ways to make the family leave quietly. But one email stood out above the rest. She had written, "I've spoken to my brother-in-law about pulling the surgery funding. If we can stop it there, they'll have no choice but to leave." That was the smoking gun. She had used her connections to actively sabotage a child's access to medical care. Not out of concern, not out of some misguided policy enforcement, but out of pure personal hatred. The court filings became public. Reporters swarmed her home. Her HOA title was suspended. Then came the city council hearings, where citizens and disability rights groups demanded new legislation around HOA power limitations and medical privacy. Karen was now the face of everything wrong with unchecked neighborhood authority, and she hated it. Still, at the first court hearing, she stood behind the microphone, lips thin, voice trembling not from shame but from resentment. "This family brought chaos to our community," she spat. "They exploited their daughter's illness to gain sympathy and ignore the rules." I looked around the courtroom. There wasn't a single person nodding in agreement. Judges don't often show emotion, but I could tell Even the presiding one had to take a long breath before continuing. He called her remarks morally reprehensible and legally indefensible. The case dragged on for weeks. But every day brought more support. People sent letters. Strangers dropped flowers on our porch. Local restaurants offered meals for Lily. A retired pediatric surgeon offered to volunteer in her next therapy round. And Lily, sweet Lily, just kept smiling. "I'm kind of famous," she said one day, flipping through cards that people sent from across the country. "Even the president's wife posted about me." I checked. She wasn't wrong. The First Lady had retweeted our story, adding, "Every child deserves care. Every parent deserves peace. This is heartbreaking. We must do better." That tweet alone made Karen's world collapse even further. The HOA board was dissolved by community vote. A new election was held. Not a single original board member was re-elected. Karen's house, once pristine and guarded by hedges, now had signs all over it, "Sold." She had moved out in the middle of the night. No goodbye. No apology. Eventually, the court awarded us a significant settlement. It wasn't about money. It was about recognition. About proving that Lily mattered. That every child, no matter their health, no matter their limitations, deserves to be seen, valued, protected. And in the months that followed, I took that energy and helped create something bigger. A coalition of parents, advocates, and legal experts. We called it the Lily Act, and it pushed for legislation preventing non-medical entities like HOAs from interfering with healthcare access or residential modifications for disabilities. It passed in 3 counties within the first year. As for Lily, she healed. Her recovery was slow, but strong. She went back to the park, drew with chalk again, waved at neighbors. She even helped design the new community bulletin board, which now reads, "Every person belongs." And on days when I look at her, the girl who nearly died because someone decided she wasn't worth saving, I remember that even the darkest cruelty can't win when the truth is loud enough. Karen tried to erase us. Instead, we painted Lily's name across every wall she tried to tear down. The day of the final court verdict felt like the end of a war, not a moment of celebration, but of silent relief, like exhaling after holding your breath for years. The courtroom was quiet, tense, thick with anticipation. On one side sat Karen, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her expression frozen somewhere between fury and fear. On the other side, it was just me, Lily's stuffed elephant tucked under my arm, a reminder of who this was all for. The judge entered, sat down and read from the bench for over 10 minutes, detailing Karen's actions, her abuse of power, her willful interference in a child's medical care, and the moral line she had crossed that no neighbor, no human being, ever should. The final judgment was clear. Karen was ordered to pay over $250,000 in damages for impersonation, emotional distress, and medical interference. She was permanently barred from holding any HOA office or position of public trust in the county. And perhaps most satisfying of all, the Willow Creek HOA was to be dissolved and restructured under the supervision of a court-appointed administrator. It was over. Karen didn't speak. She didn't even look at me. She simply stood, gathered her papers, and walked out of the courtroom like a shadow, smaller than she'd ever looked before. The crowd that had gathered outside cheered not for me, but for Lily, holding posters, some with her artwork printed on them, others simply saying, "Lily matters." I walked out into the sunlight with tears burning behind my eyes, not because I was broken, but because justice had finally stood up for someone who couldn't do it herself. Back home, Lily was waiting, sitting on the front porch in a pink hoodie, her cheeks full of color, her heart monitor no longer beeping every second. She was healing. The surgery she'd fought so long to receive had been a success. Her doctors were optimistic. Her breathing had improved, her stamina doubled, and her eyes, oh, those eyes, sparkled with a calm confidence I hadn't seen since before Karen's reign of terror. When I told her the news that Karen had lost, that the court had agreed she was wrong, she just smiled and whispered, "I knew you'd win." She didn't ask about the money. She didn't care about the fines. All she cared about was knowing the truth had been spoken out loud and heard. In the weeks that followed, Life slowly settled back into a rhythm. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now came by with baked goods and shy apologies. Some admitted they were scared of Karen. Others said they didn't know the full truth. I accepted their words, but made no promises. Trust, once broken, doesn't grow back quickly. But Lily, ever the optimist, forgave them all. She waved at everyone. She drew sidewalk chalk hearts again. She even convinced me to take her back to the same park where she used to sit and watch other kids play. This time, she rolled up to the swing and asked me to lift her in. I pushed her gently, watching the wind kiss her cheeks, and I thought, this is what victory looks like, not in a courtroom, but in a swing under sunlight with laughter. As spring arrived, something unexpected happened. Letters began to pour in, not just from our town, but from across the country. Parents of disabled children, veterans, nurses, teachers, people who had watched Lily's story unfold and saw in it something bigger than just a feud with an HOA. They saw a reminder that every life matters, that no child is a burden, and that silence in the face of cruelty is its own kind of violence. One letter came from a girl named Mia in Ohio. She wrote, "I have a heart problem too. When I saw Lily on TV, I felt less alone. That one made me cry." Lily hung it on her wall, next to a drawing of her stuffed elephant with a superhero cape. Eventually, the mayor invited us to a small town hall event to speak about Lily's case. At first, I declined. Public speaking was never my thing. But Lily wanted to go. So I stood on a stage in front of a crowd of strangers and said something I'd never said out loud before. They tried to erase her. They tried to convince the world that she didn't deserve to live. But now the whole world knows her name. The audience rose to their feet. Lily waved, shyly, her little hand trembling. That night, she fell asleep curled beside me on the couch, a smile still on her face. And as I watched her breathing, slow, steady, peaceful, I whispered to the dark, "They lost. You won. If you've made it this far, thank you, from the bottom of my heart." This wasn't just a story. It was a cry for justice. It was a fight for a little girl who was nearly erased by someone who thought power gave her the right to decide who lives and who doesn't. But here's the truth. No one has that right. Not an HOA, not a neighbor, not a board with a clipboard and a twisted sense of control. If you believe that every child deserves dignity, no matter their condition, no matter how they were born, then please share this story. Let Lily's voice, and the voices of kids just like her, echo far beyond our little town. Have you ever faced HOA, abuse, or discrimination? Did someone try to make you feel small, invisible, or unworthy because of your family, your disability, or your fight to belong? Tell us your story in the comments below. This is more than a video, it's a community. And if we don't speak up, this kind of cruelty will keep happening behind closed gates, under fake smiles, inside perfectly painted houses with perfectly evil hearts. I started this channel because too many stories like ours go unheard. Too many families suffer in silence, while people like Karen smile for their garden club photos and destroy lives behind the scenes. But not here. This is HOA Karen, the channel where we expose the ones who think they're untouchable, the ones who misuse power, and the ones who hide cruelty behind rules. If you believe in truth, in justice, and in holding these people accountable, then hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this isn't the last story we'll tell. Let Lily be the start of something bigger. Let her story be the reason someone else doesn't give up. Because no child is a burden. And no family should ever have to fight this hard just to be treated like they belong.